Good afternoon. Yes, indeed, it is afternoon. It's Friday afternoon on the 14th of August. And at the time of this recording, and this is the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. And this is my 28-minute slot every Friday where I talk about mental health. It's my main dealio. That's what I do with my show and have done for many, many years, way before this thing became popular or had the spotlight brought upon it. I was battling away all on my own, and then all of a sudden there was this wave of change in this country which kind of surprised me and even encouraged me, and now this is a topic that has come to the fore and we talk a lot about it. And I listen to the radio a lot, and I heard that they were saying that the incidence of young people, teenagers, and that suffering from depression is radically increased, and I understand that a lot of young people are very worried about their world, their future, how things are going, especially when we have things like the second COVID outbreak. There's a lot of fear amongst people because there are not enough brave people telling them to calm down, so they're all going nuts and stripping shelves in supermarkets and, just behaving disgustingly, basically. There is no need for it. We know that. Everybody needs to stay calm and support each other. Those are the most important things. However, one of the good things that I have noticed is that people have become a lot more polite. I always notice the things that aren't there. I've trained myself to do so, and in the past, before COVID, there was a real attitude about people where they treated others with almost complete disregard. The number of times I heard people say please and thank you were few and far between, but that has all changed, and I make a point of always looking at somebody and saying thank you very much, I appreciate that, I appreciate your efforts, and being genuine. Not just saying, have a nice day, but actually meaning, I see you. I see you there, I see you as a human being, and I appreciate the work that you do. And I do value you as a person. That's where we need to get to. We need to learn the lessons, and don't panic. This country has all the resources it could possibly need, and more. We could feed 100 million people in this country. Okay, now we don't really need the rest of the world to survive because of a relatively, a lack of economy of scales. In other words, we don't have a big enough population to sustain a lot of internal markets of frivolous goods like TVs and stereos and rubbish like that. No, we don't make those sort of things. Unfortunately, we all went cray-cray and got China to make them all for us. So, where we had factories in the past when I was a child where we made all those sort of things ourselves, those businesses, one by one, have slowly faded away as we have centralised production. And so we have lost the ability to fully produce everything that we need. We could gear up if we really needed to, if there was a much, much worse pandemic than what we are facing now. As 20 million people have got or have contracted COVID, and quite a few have died, but about 1 in 20, so it's not as bad as it could have been. The Black Plague killed 1 in 3, so that gives you an idea. 1 in 20 versus 1 in 3 is a hell of a difference, and that's when society crumbles. There's this term in Maori called kia maia, which is be resolute. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to understand that this is a marathon, and we have to sustain the fight. We can't just watch it disappear and say, oh, it's all over and we're back to normal. This is our new normal, and it will be for many, many years to come. It will change the whole world. People will not want to fly in planes for years, so our tourism is going to be drastically affected, and we have to realise that and put our emphasis on things like food production, where we had a lot of foreigners coming in. We need to train our own people to do all of the jobs that can't be filled with people who can't get here. So it's a matter of supporting our industries, not just in a financial sense, but a physical sense. Now, the fact of the matter is that the government does not have bottomless pockets, and money will start getting tight, and we're definitely going to see some kind of recession, and it's going to be pretty severe, and it's going to be pretty long. So the most important thing that we can do is support each other through this. And I get back to this idea of young people suffering from mental health. What we have to do to stop them from falling into too much depression is to allow them to be young, to enjoy this country, to take them out and show them the country that they live in. It is absolutely magnificent. Now, I know quite a lot of young people now, because I'm of that age where those young people, teenagers and slightly older, I know a lot of young men and women from around about 16 to 30 odd. A lot of them are having their own children, becoming parents, and I used to despise children. I used to absolutely hate them, but now I find that I'm meeting some of those young people who are really actually very onto it, very nice young people, like my nephew-in-law, Kieran. He's 16, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, doesn't do drugs. You know, he's a really good, kind, considerate young man, and I take him fishing in my boat, and I try and teach him what I can while I'm still around, and I know that he will teach the next generation, because he's that kind of kid who will take everything on board, and he's respectful and polite, and I'm really, really impressed by young people who are like that. So I guess I dedicate the show to you, Kieran. Thanks, mate. It's good to have you around. Right, well, I'm going to have to get on with my story in 3 minutes. For those of you who tuned in last week, Brett rang me up twice while I was doing my show, and papers went all over the floor, and it was a hell of a mess. So we'll try not to do that this week. Right, well, in finishing, I just want to say it is very important that we teach these young people how beautiful this country is. Take them into the outdoors, the rivers, the lakes, the mountains, the sea, and show them what a truly magnificent country this is. Unfortunately, with modern technology, they're all buried in smartphones, and they don't get out very much. So it's very, very important that we show them how great this country is and the wonderful things that they can do in the outdoors. And that's the corner we need to turn, to teach them to protect the wildlife, to enjoy it, to love it. And it's only when people buy in like that that you get the support you need to enhance the magnificent country we have, and to eradicate pests where and when we can, to make this a more beautiful place. And if the young people get in to that sort of thing, get into the outdoors, tramping, swimming, fishing, all those sorts of things, they will find that their mental health will improve vastly, because they are letting nature and the beauty of this country into their hearts and their minds, and that will make them more peaceful and calm than worrying about global warming or viruses. It's important that we focus on the good things that we do have, and that way we are not getting anxious and worried and wound up and depressed about what the future might hold. The future is tomorrow. What we need to concentrate on is making the most of today, and that's where I've come in my journey, and it's taken me many, many years to get there. It's not easy when you're suffering from depression to get yourself up, because the one thing you lack is motivation. So it's very important for anyone, if you know someone who's suffering depression, support them, just gently chip away. And again, it's a marathon, nothing happens overnight, but you can see changes in people bit by bit, and as long as you keep communicating and keep those positive messages, you can help them untold, and I would very much like to see you do that. Well, my show's not just about ranting on about mental health problems and advice on what I think we should do. It's also stories. Stories from around New Zealand, Africa, Europe, Asia, all over the place I've been. And I've also written a lot about New Zealand since I've come back here, fishing and hunting and travelling around the country. And the reason I've done these stories is to show people that just because you do suffer from debilitating depression, you can still achieve a lot in your life. You know, when you're up, make the most of it, and when you're down, hold on tight. And this is one of my more recent pieces. This is called The End of the Road. The West Coast has always held a fascination for me, from the 90 to the fjords of that spectacular side. The East has always been my favourite side, but the West always calls and challenges you. So I knew I had to go there, through the top gorge, the Buller, and out to the West Coast at the top. But I was to be delayed unexpectedly. At the time, I was living in Pahiatua with my dog Diamond, me and Diamond Dog. I had just finished doing up and selling my house in Wainui for a good profit, but ended up having a breakdown. I then bought a ute, a computer, a huge trailer for my friend Keith, and a few other bits and pieces. I then bought my shop and flat in Pahiatua, moved 17 trailer loads of junk in, and taken on looking after Diamond Dog, a crazy mongrel that seemed to suit me well. I took to retraining a dog, already 3 years old, and reading maps, dreaming and planning. With the dog, I really got into the outdoors and came up with the idea of going on an extended camping holiday with my hound. I kept coming back to the West Coast on the map. I had not really been south of Westport on the road, and it soon became apparent the road was calling me. I compiled a huge and comprehensive list of all the gear I would need, mostly fishing, diving, camping and cooking. Then I systematically packed all the gear in fish bins and packed it perfectly in the huge tough tray of the ute. On top of the bins I put my rods and a single foam mattress, all covered and held down with a tawny cover. Perfect. I wasted no time packing, knowing I had everything I could possibly need. I had planned that part well. As for the journey itself, I had only planned to drive to Blenheim, then through Renwick, the Wairau, St Arnaud, then left after Murchison, down 65 to Springs Junction on the Lewis Pass, where I hoped to catch up with an old friend, Tar. I had a fantastic trip down, from 3 a.m. to the ferry from Wellington at 6, a great crossing through the sounds I fell in love with as a child. I stopped in Blenheim for lunch, and stores. The dog and I filled up with pies. It was great to retrace my steps through the vineyards to Renwick, then blast down the straight roads of the interior with the CD blasting out and the warm wind in my face. Past the north shore of Lake Rotoiti and the south side of Kahurangi National Park, and left after Murchison down Springs Junction on Lewis Pass. It was late by the time I got through to Springs Junction. It was dark and grey, everything was shut, and it was obvious I wouldn't be catching up with Tar. So I unloaded the fish bins under the ute, brewed a coffee and crashed out with the dog on the tray of the ute. The foam mattress was super comfortable and the tonne kept me dry, and sleeping in my sleeping bag with my back to the dog kept me warm. The next day I headed up to Reefton, and I was just so struck with the place. Many of the early buildings were still standing, real gems, and I spent the day enjoying coffee and walking the dog in the park and exploring the town. As an old gold mining town, it was steeped in history and was the first town in New Zealand to have electricity. In the afternoon I stumbled upon a strange old hardware store and struck up a conversation with the owner. The conversation turned to gold panning, and he told me he panned the Anangahua, which ran through town. He also told me of a spot just out of town called Slab Creek Hut, where I could go gold panning and camp for a night or two. So I bought a sweet little pan from him and headed to the spot, which was so beautiful I knew straight away I had to set up camp and pan for a while. On arriving at Slab Creek Hut, I noticed a wide dirt track heading up the hill. It led to a flattened area out of sight, where pine trees had been cut and loaded up many years ago. The flat site had become overgrown with broom, and I found a protected campsite amongst that broom. Perfect. I set up the campsite, hidden up there, with a tarp on the ground, then a tent and a tarp over the top, tied to the broom, providing a waterproof cover and a protected area outside for my camp lounge and kitchen. Weka had spread throughout the undergrowth, and Diamond Dog had great fun chasing them through their tunnels, but happily never managed to catch one. I made a wonderful fire that night and drifted off to sleep, serenaded by the weka and morepork. Over the next week I donned my wetsuit every day and headed up the creek to a large boulder that I thought might bear some gold underneath it. Every day I dug my way down into the riverbed, panning as I went. Diamond Dog sat on the track some 20 metres away like a sentinel, patient and unmoving. I was worried she would attack passing strangers, but was a rat when I saw her let them pass without aggression. Being a pit bull cross, pretty solid and intimidating with a bit of an aggressive mental streak, I had to watch her closely to avoid her harming anyone stupid enough to challenge me or her. She was so well behaved, and we spent some of the happiest days of my life panning for gold and camping in the bush. After a few days camping, I decided to head to town in the evening for a beer. The dog watched the ute while I had a couple of pints and won $500 on the pokies. Thanks to that wonderful win, I had a steak dinner at the pub every night, a few pints and a half a dozen beers to take back to camp. It was just paradise. Unfortunately, dogs were not allowed into camping grounds, so the dog and I had to live at the creek, which in many ways was better. I also spent a bit of time driving around Reefton, photographing all of its wonderful buildings, places of history, the river, railway station, and so on. After a wonderful week in Reefton, I headed off with a few flakes of gold and memories I will never forget. I headed back up Highway 69 to the Unangahua, then followed the Buller to the turn-off just before Westport and out to the coast at Charleston. I blasted down the coast at quite illegal speeds, past Pinakaiki, the CD whamming it out full bore. I had just got to the Grey River. The sky turned dark and I realised what an appropriate name Greymouth has. I stopped at Greymouth for lunch, and my dog bit some idiot who came too close when I was eating. I loved to share my burgers with the dog, but made sure I didn't give her too much grease. I checked out the map at Greymouth and decided to head down the coast through Hokitika and Ross and inland on Highway 6 and back out through the coast to a place called Okarito Lagoon. It was an inspired choice. There was a very basic campsite at Okarito, just campsites and fireplaces, but to its credit, it also featured a kitchen, dining room, toilets and showers. Just perfect. I walked Diamond Dog down the beach every day, fished for and caught rig and collected firewood. The rig, a very nice type of eating shark, were large and plentiful. The dog and I had all the fish we could eat, and the greedy hound could eat her heart's content. At night I would light big fires all night, get on the piss and smoke with foreigners touring the beautiful south. I remember a young English couple who were particularly fun, and I think they will remember our couple of nights together as the best of their New Zealand holiday. I spent a wonderful week at Okarito beneath the magnificent Southern Alps. Honestly, it moved my soul. Franz Josef was just down the road, so I stopped there for lunch to visit the glacier. I was amazed at how busy the town was, with choppers constantly flying rich visitors up to Fox Glacier. I drove up to Franz Josef and was very happy to be greeted by some mountain kia, but was shocked at just how far the glacier has receded since last time I'd seen it. From Franz Josef, I followed Highway 6 down to Haast, the last town of any significance on the west coast. I stopped there at their flash pub for a beer and a feed, resupplied and blasted down the road through Hannah's Green as the trees created the most incredible green tunnel as I neared the end of the road. From there to Neil's Beach to Patterson Inlet where the road finishes. As it turned out, no one lived there. There were only unoccupied buildings belonging to fish companies, a wharf and a few commercial boats anchored in the small bay. So I cruised back to Neil's Beach. The place was little more than a lightly populated village on the south side of the Arafota River, but had the most magic feel to it. The next day we cruised around the corner of Patterson Inlet, and I was invited to go out to pull a few cray pots. I could not believe my eyes. In each of the pots are about 18 magnificent huge buck crays. We went home and steamed them up and had a wonderful afternoon, eating crayfish and drinking beer until I was about to pop. I went back to my accommodation at Neil's Beach that night and gave my dog 2 massive crayfish, which she managed to scoff down without stopping. It was amazing how much that dog could eat. The end of the road turned out better than I could have hoped for. And Grant, who I stayed with at Neil's Beach, and his mates were so warm and welcoming I found it hard to leave. Grant shook my hand and said goodbye and told me I'll never be back again. I assure you, my friend, one day I will be. From Neil's Beach, the dog and I blasted up the coast to Hokitika and had a good look around that sweet little town. I spent a whole day wandering around, checking out and photographing the incredible works of art the local carvers had turned out of greenstone. There were magnificent works of art there, going for as much as 10 grand, which to my mind was still cheap for how beautiful, rare and wondrous these things are. That night I got pissed off at a local pub and stayed out the back with a dog, snoring at the foot of my bed. From Hokitika we shot back up the coast to the Bulla, just south of Westport, and headed back inland along Highway 6 to 63 and crashed the night just out of St Arnaud on the north shore of Lake Rotoiti, falling asleep at the call of the Moorpork. From there we headed home, and on the ferry out of Queen Charlotte I had that sinking feeling in my stomach I always get when I leave that beautiful place. When we got home, I spent quite a while looking back through the photos I took of that trip. It was one of those ones that delivered everything I could have hoped for. It is a place I know I just have to get back to again. Well, I thought I was going to run out of time there, so I skipped the page, and it turns out I finished quick, so there you have it. Sometimes I've just got to trust the fact that I'm not reading too slowly. The stories sound much better if I slow down and get into a rhythm, but always I'm pressed for time, and I've just got to push as hard as I can to get everything done inside 28 minutes. So, looky there, I've got a whole 5 minutes left before the end of the show. Naughty me. Anyway, that gives me a little bit more time to talk about other things like mental health, and I'd like to get back to that for just a moment if I can. It is important that we support our young people, but it's important that we realise too that people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s also suffer from depression, and many of those people are missing out. What tends to happen is when there is money to hand out, children and young people get most of it. They get the lion's share, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. The problem I do have is that other people get forgotten, and there is absolutely nothing for them whatsoever. There was a radio show recently on another channel, and they were raising money, and they raised, I can't remember, it was something like over 120,000, could have been more, that they raised. And, they raised all this money for young people to go and, see a psychiatrist and talk about mental health issues, which was wonderful. It was wonderful that they did that. The only trouble is every single cent of that money got dedicated to people under 21, and not a bean went to anyone else. That is to say, me and everyone else in my situation. So unfortunately, there comes a point when society just throws you on the heap, and you live below the poverty line for the rest of your life. And most people I know, and I know a lot of people on the old Benny, I know plenty because, when you're in that circle, you tend to mix with the people who are unemployed. And none of us want to be, I can assure you. Nobody really wants to be. No one wants to live below the poverty line on budget bread and beans. It's no fun. Anyone who thinks it's easy sitting there every day is wrong. It is depressing. It is hard because you tend to get isolated from society, and unfortunately we judge each other so much. We are so judgmental. If you go to a party, people just trot out lines like, oh, so what do you do? In other words, what status do you have in society? This is what they're trying to establish. If you have an important job, you're an important person, and you're treated differently accordingly. So we have this structure in society, and a lot of it is subliminal. It's things that we don't really think about. We're not trying to be rude when we ask questions like that. But if I say to someone, oh, I'm on the benefit because of mental health issues, they just say, oh. And that oh might as well just be a stab in the eye. It is the attitudes that need to change. It is the attitudes towards issues like this, and realise that, sometimes things can hit you out of the blue. A lot of the time people turn away. Not my problem. That makes you the problem when you say things like that. When you don't care, that means that others will suffer. Bound to, has to happen. Can't be any other way. So, if you realise that mental illness is not a weakness, you can get knocked off your pins so easy, lose somebody tragically who you really love, and that can just rip the world from under your feet. And without even realising how vulnerable you are, you can have a breakdown really easily. Now, a lot of the time, I must emphasise, this is not forever. Mental illness is not a disease that you can never recover from, but it's something that you need to work on progressively. And if you don't work on it, the likelihood is you're going to stay in the rut exactly where you are. So you need to chip away on it bit by bit. And it's okay. It's okay to ask for help. It doesn't make you weak. Quite the opposite. It makes you brave. And people seem surprised that I'm so willing to be open about my own mental health issues, my own suffering, and they seem surprised and shocked and, oh, that's very good of you, very brave of you. It's not. We need to make this conversation normal. We need to be able to be honest without trying to hide our problems from other people and pretend that everything's all right. We need to be able to say, look, this isn't forever, and we will help you to get back on your feet and recover. And most people, in most cases, not all, but most, do get better, and some, a good number, over half, can recover completely. All of us will suffer some sort of depression over our lifetimes. That is a fact. And we've got to realise that by supporting people, we can help them get over it, and really nobody deserves to suffer, do they? Right, well, that's my show for another week. I just want to say thank you very much to Wairarapa TV, all the sponsors, New Zealand On Air, all those great folk who do support us. Thanks to my friends in the Hawke's Bay for tuning in. Thank you for those in the Wairarapa for tuning in. Remember, we're on Freeview on Wairarapa TV, and the biggest thanks of all to Michael and Veronica, who've supported me for so long, let me do the show for free. I have no sponsor, but out of the kindness of their hearts, they support me, so thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. Well, that's me for another week, so hopefully I'll see you next Friday. Bye for now.